Part 1. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 1. Chapter 1. Start over, start over. Mom, look, it's a girl. We finally have a girl in our family. Li Lao-san's wife was so surprised that her throat almost broke. Let me see, the gray-haired Mrs. Li trembled her lips and almost burst into tears. Thanks to the blessings of our ancestors, our old Li family has given birth to a lot of brats, but we have a girl. Outside the cave, the three brothers of the Li family and a few boys were all looking around with their legs raised, and they all cheered when they heard this. We have a sister. Miscellaneous, I want to see my sister, I want to see my sister. Li Laosi was even more excited to be a father. Mom, how is Hong Ying doing? Is the little girl fat? Orange Mrs. Li shouted directly, with full force, shut your mouths, don't scare our precious girls. Li Jiyan was still in a daze, but was trembling with fright at the voice. I had a rare good sleep last night. It was long and sweet, and my body was warm and comfortable. But before she could enjoy it for a while, her head suddenly started to hurt. The pain from being squeezed from the narrow place made her angry. It doesn't hurt now, but I feel chilly all over. Someone slapped her hard twice on the buttocks. She cursed in embarrassment, but when she opened her mouth, she cried like a weak kitten. She was so shocked that she quickly shut her mouth and almost choked to death. Is this her voice? When did she become a baby? Isn't it because you got a tire following the fashion? Seeing that her granddaughter was scared, Mrs. Li quickly lowered her voice. Fourth brother, come in quickly and warm the child up against your flesh. This child was born half a month ago, and the method passed down from the elders is to keep him in this way, in order to keep the soul in check. Soon, Li Jiyan was picked up and placed in a warm embrace. Her heartbeat was pounding in her ears, which was extremely powerful. A big hand carefully patted her back, coaxing softly. Daughter, I am your father, don't be afraid, Dad is holding you and we will be fine. Li Jiyan's eyes suddenly became sore, and tears fell out. Dad. It seems that I haven't mentioned it in many years, and I don't want to mention this title. After her parents divorced and started their own families, and the grandmother who raised her passed away, she became a ball, kicking back and forth. Although he is not short of money and has enough food and clothing, he has never been loved and cherished so much. Although I don't know how I fell asleep and got pregnant in a fashionable manner. But shouldn't we be lucky to have such a good father when we were born? Li Chuzheng, the fourth son of the Li family, lowered his head and saw tears filling the little girl's eye sockets, as if someone had stabbed her heart. He was wandering around in pain and tried his best to coax him. Daughter, don't cry, Dad is here, he is amazing, very strong, and can also shoot arrows. When you grow up, Dad will go up the mountain to catch little rabbits for you. On one side, Mrs. Li and her third daughter-in-law Zhao Yuru helped her fourth daughter-in-law Tao Hongying clean up. Seeing Li Laosi doing this, she also smiled. The fourth child looks like he loves his daughter. When Jian was born, he wouldn't even give her a hug. Tao Hongying smiled weakly, but when she touched her chest, which was not swollen at all, she began to feel worried again. This child was born at the wrong time. Their family was fleeing from famine, planning to join distant relatives thousands of miles away. Just half a month after leaving, the girl gave birth. Old Mrs. Li is actually worried, but with her precious granddaughter in hand, any difficulty is not too difficult. She assigned tasks repeatedly. The second and third sons will build another stove, and the third daughter-in-law will take out the handful of white rice at home to make porridge. Remember to add more water and boil out the rice oil, and I will give it to my precious granddaughter later. After finishing speaking, she hesitated for a moment and then said again. The fourth brother went into the mountains to have a look. It would be better if he could catch pheasants, Grnge and his brothers were looking for wild vegetables nearby. Let's have a meal of wild vegetable porridge to celebrate. The Li family immediately took action, with smiles on every face. The Li family has Ding Wang, the second son's son is Grnge, and the third son's son is Jiawen Jiaxi. The firstborn in the fourth family's family is the little boy, Jian, who seems to have fallen into the little boy's nest. Tao Hongying is pregnant again this time, and everyone is looking forward to having a little girl in her belly. Now I finally got my wish, and I will have a soft and sweet baby at home. Li Laozi carefully took his daughter out and put her in his wife's arms, and then went up the mountain in high spirits. It's a pity that there has been a drought here for 2 consecutive years outside the Great Wall. It was hard to find any green in the mountains, let alone pheasants and rabbits. He could only come back with a bag full of wild vegetables. Soon, the family's lunch was ready. Li Jiyan also drank the rice oil, which was a little sticky and sweet. In fact, I am not really hungry, but it is enough to fool a little baby. It is difficult for men to come forward, but boys have no scruples. The 5 brothers Li Jian brought the bowl of porridge and sipped it while watching the little sister drinking the rice oil and shouting from time to time. "Oh my little sister can roll her tongue. Brother, why is my little sister blushing like a monkey's butt? Miscellaneous, when will my little sister learn to speak?" Mrs. Li was curious and amused when she heard this, and quickly waved her pipe and pot to chase away the people. Go, eat while you're at it, don't disturb your sister, she should choke." The boys were reluctant to leave her, and they all ran to the entrance of the cave because they couldn't bear to see their little sister suffer. Tao Hongying finished feeding her daughter and drank 2 bowls of porridge herself. Then she hugged her daughter and was carried into the wheelbarrow by Mr. Li. The Li family's escape route will continue, because it is rare to delay giving birth to a child for a whole morning. Behind us there are bandits, and barbarians who are burning, killing and looting. There is a long road ahead, so we can't make it if we don't hurry up. Li Jiyan's head was dizzy from the jolt, and he could hear Mrs. Li and Mr. Li calculating how much food they had at home. Next time she encounters a town, she will buy some eggs or something like that. She also sighed in her heart. The new family seems nice, but they are really poor. The starting point is to escape from famine, fearing that you will suffer hardship. She was really worried about survival and missed the farmyard in her previous life. I don't know if she missed her too much, but she actually fell asleep and returned to the farmyard in her dream. The chickens and ducks in the front yard seemed a little hungry, and they were chirping in their nests. The hens had 7 or 8 eggs in their nests. The 4 little fat pigs in the pigsty were humming incessantly as they leaned against the trough. The dairy goat tied to the horn tree in the courtyard is nursing a lamb. The lamb is kneeling on the ground, waving its little tail, which is extremely cute. Li Jiyan was impatient to make arrangements, so she went to the vegetable garden behind to pull out a few cabbage plants and place one for chickens, ducks, and sheep. The yard finally became quiet, and Li Jiyan was also stunned. Isn't this dream too real? But the previous neighbors were gone, the path in front of the yard was gone, and the hills in the distance were gone, replaced by white mist. It was as if everything else in the world had disappeared, leaving only her small courtyard and the 5 acres of private land behind her house. Is this a golden finger given by the time-traveling god? Or is it compensation for being a refugee at birth? Li Jiyan was so excited that she woke up from dizziness and couldn't help grinning. Tao Hongying looked down and smiled. "Daddy, look, our daughter is smiling." Li Laozi is a man with natural power. He has 2 bags of grain on his wheelbarrow, as well as his wife and children. He didn't feel it was difficult. He looked over and smiled, showing his big white teeth. "My daughter is so beautiful, she must be a blessing." Tao Hongying kissed her daughter and began to feel worried again. When she raised her eyes, she saw something white on the roadside. She could tell the difference clearly and was so shocked that she pulled Li Laozi to look. Goat, milk, dairy goat. End of this chapter. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, delayed flowering. Chapter 2. Chapter 2. There is a little lucky girl in my family. Li Laozi followed his wife's hand and immediately threw the wheelbarrow and ran out. Tao Hongying hugged the child and got out of the car along with 2 bags of food. The Li family members were startled and stepped forward to help. Old Mrs. Li grabbed her granddaughter with a blue face, screamed in a heartless manner, and finally cursed. The 4th child had a seizure and broke my granddaughter. I will fight him tooth and nail. In the end, Li Laozi actually carried a dairy goat on his shoulders and ran back with a big grin. The pure goat's milk soaked half of his shoulders, and everyone's eyes widened in joy. Oh, where did this good thing come from? God opened my eyes, it turned out to be a dairy goat. Great, my sister has milk to drink. Old Mrs. Li even kissed her granddaughter twice on the forehead. You girl are God's own daughter, you are so lucky, it's like I sent you milk specially. Li Jiyan pouted her mouth proudly and spit out a bubble of saliva. This is the ration she gave herself. When Jian and Jiaxi were naughty at the age of 8 or 9, they stepped forward and secretly touched their little sister's face. Needless to say, he was immediately slapped back by the old lady. Milk, let's just touch it and feel blessed. Maybe we can pick up a sheep soon. Go, you think this good thing is a cabbage, just pull it out as you like. Mrs. Li laughed and scolded her. Just when she was happy, Mr. Li's second daughter-in-law Wu Kuiwa didn't even blink. She swallowed her saliva and said, Mom, goat's milk is not as good as your own mother's milk. It's better to kill the goat and stew it and eat it. Hongying drinks some broth and the milk will be good. Everyone looked bad when they heard this, and Mrs. Li knocked the pipe pot in her hand immediately, causing Wu Gihua to jump 3 feet high in pain. Useless things, besides eating, what else do you know? You were the only one who was lazy along the way. Now even the little girl's milk goat is stewed. Are you going to heaven? Wu Kuiwa was most afraid of her mother-in-law, so she didn't dare to talk back and ran away. Li Laoer quickly apologized for his wife. Mom, she has always been careless. Don't be as smart as her. This goat is to bring milk to the little girl. No one in the house can touch it. Don't worry. Li Jiyan saw that everyone had forgotten that she was still hungry, so she hurriedly called out. The soft and small child, the long eyelashes fan, the big eyes stared, and the old lady Li changed her face. Hey, Grandma's little lucky girl is hungry, isn't she? Grandma will boil goat milk for you right now. Not long after leaving, the Li family's team stopped again because of a dairy goat, seeking the shade of a tree to set up a stove to cook goat's milk. Cook a little more at a time and put it in a big gourd. When you are hungry, you can drink it when you are on your way. A few boys in Jian couldn't bear their temper and ran around playing around. Li Jiyan was lying in her grandma's arms, drinking fragrant goat milk, her big bright eyes rolling around. Place a dozen eggs in the grass in front of Jian, and put a lame old hen behind the tree not far from Jian. Soon, the Li family team became lively again. Jian jumped 3 feet high, holding up the 2 eggs in his hand and squealing. Milk, it's eggs, I touched the eggs. Li Laoer hurried over and saw a nest of more than a dozen eggs. He was so surprised that he didn't know what to say. Before he could turn around to confirm the news to his family, Jia 11 followed the cookling sound and pulled the hen out. He seemed to be in disbelief. He struggled to lift the hen and yelled one word to his second uncle, chicken. Silly boy, you haven't come back yet, what are you waiting for? Mrs. Li waved the pipe pot in her hand and pulled it far away. It turned out that the boys shouted too loudly, and the fleeing people walking nearby gathered around. The wealth is not revealed, and it is obvious that the Li family has pierced the eyes of outsiders. Li Laosi took out the hatchet from under the wheelbarrow and looked at the people surrounding him fiercely. As expected, those people were a little embarrassed and hesitant, stared at Jia 11 and Jian, and finally stepped back. Jia Xijian was frightened and ran back to her family, but she still didn't forget to show off. Milk, look at the hens and eggs we found, we touched our sister, we are so blessed. The Li family all laughed, thinking it was a coincidence. But Mrs. Li made the mistake of muttering, once is a coincidence, twice is still a coincidence, what about 3 times? She quietly touched her granddaughter's little hand. The little girl was sleeping sweetly and sweetly, her eyelashes trembling slightly, turning everyone who looked at her into honey. She told the third daughter-in-law, boil the eggs for Hong Ying to replenish her body, and wait until the hens have settled down in the evening to make soup. After saying that, she excused herself and went into the woods. The woods were bare and there were few green grasses. She looked around and was a little disappointed. It was really convenient. When I got up again, I found that there was a sweet potato seedling growing not far away. She ran over in 2 steps, pulled up a tree, and brought out 2 fist-sized sweet potatoes, which made her eyes red. She ran back like crazy, grabbed her granddaughter and started crying. Woo, my ancestors are blessing me, God is opening my eyes, the sky is full of gods and Buddhas, our old Li family is really lucky, we are very lucky. Everyone in the Li family was startled by the old lady and quickly advised her. Mom, what's wrong with you? Yes, mother, as long as we are here, we will not let you suffer. Only Jiyan, who was choked by the old lady and almost couldn't breathe, knew. Because she moved the sweet potato seedlings out of the space and then moved them so far into the forest, she was so tired that she was still dizzy now. It is not easy for a baby who is less than a day old to have to worry about the survival of his family. But she must firmly believe that she is blessed, and it must be engraved in the hearts of everyone in the Li family. This will make it easier for her to use the space in the future and help her family solve the problem of food and clothing. The 4th child is guarding the house, the 2nd and 3rd children are holding a basket with a lid and following me. Old Mrs. Li wiped away her tears, kissed her precious granddaughter again, ordered the soldiers and went to dig sweet potatoes. Jiyan could finally sleep peacefully. During this period, she was fed goat milk twice more. When she woke up completely, it was already dark. She was held in the arms of Mrs. Li. In front of her was a bonfire. Beside the bonfire was a drooling boy squatting. When Mrs. Li saw that her granddaughter had woken up, she quickly turned her back and helped her pee, with a smile on her face. My dear granddaughter is awake, we will drink milk soon. Jian looked at grandma longingly, Nai, when can I eat roasted sweet potatoes? Eat, just eat, the old lady glared at her grandson and cursed in a low voice. You must remember, these good things at home are all thanks to your sister's blessing. If you treat your sister well in the future, if you dare to bully her, I will break your legs. The boys nodded quickly, and Mrs. Li looked at the other bonfires in the distance, lowering her voice even more. Other people are still hungry, but we still have eggs to eat, goat's milk to drink, stewed chicken, and roasted sweet potatoes. It's simply better than living at home. Hold your mouths tightly, the good meat will rot in the pot, do you understand? End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 3. Chapter 3. Follow your sister and you will have meat to eat. A few boys were about to set their heads on fire, and then Mrs. Li pulled out a few dark sweet potatoes from under the bonfire. Each person was given one, and the rest were given to their parents. Soon, everyone in the Li family, young and old, was eating the sweet roasted sweet potatoes. Wu Kuiwa stretched her neck and looked at Tao Hongying eating eggs, curling her lips and complaining. A film about a girl, I really treat it as a treasure. Li Lao glared at her, moved his buttocks, and refused to pay attention. On the other hand, Li Lao-san and his wife gathered together, with smiles on their faces. Mom is right, the little girl is really blessed. She is only less than a day old, and the family has received so many good things it's really unimaginable. Yes, my mother is grinning from the corner of her mouth to her ears. She has had a hard time in the past 2 years, and her hair is almost completely white. On the other side, Mrs. Lee has already picked up her eldest grandson Jiaran, who is studying, and has named her granddaughter. Her nickname is Funiur. But the big name was a problem, so Jiaran finally suggested it. Mistress, it has only taken 3 generations of our Lee family to have such a girl. It is a great joy. Why not name your sister Jian, which means good news and a pleasant voice? Good news. Old Mrs. Lee smacked her lips twice, feeling that the name was smooth and had a good meaning. Every time I shout from now on, there will be good news. Okay, let's call it good news. Li Jian was patted gently by her grandma, smelling the sweet smell of roasted sweet potatoes in the air, drooling as she lay there, feeling a little drowsy again. Having half asleep and half awake, I heard my family shouting good news one after another, with the same names as in the previous life, and I couldn't help but raise the corners of my mouth. Perhaps this is the reason why she traveled through time. There was no talking all night, and early the next morning, the Lee family set off again. He didn't stop for a whole day. He measured 50 miles step by step, and his scalp was numb from the sun. Seeing that her granddaughter's face was red, Mrs. Lee couldn't bear to part with her, so she called everyone. Let's find a place to rest. Cut up the sweet potatoes and put them into sorghum noodles to make porridge. Before anyone could respond, there was a sudden commotion in front of them. Li Lao ran to inquire about it and waved vigorously when he came back. Mom, let's go quickly, we found a small river ahead. When they heard that there was water, everyone was like chicken blood and ran forward. Soon, the river was in sight. The water was very shallow, but it was enough for everyone to wash and cook. Li Laozi felt sorry for his wife and mother, so he carried his daughter on his back and went to the river to fetch water. The 2 brats Jian and Jiaxi also dug sand and surrounded the rocks to cut off the water, intending to drink from the dairy goats. Li Jian slept for most of the day and her body was sore. She was just about to show off her skills when the opportunity came. While Li Laozi was bending down to collect the water, she started crying at the top of her lungs. Li Laozi hurriedly put down his daughter to check, and even Jian and Jia 11 came over to ask. Did my sister pee? But the good news only required 2 cries, and Li Laozi had to go back to carry water. As a result, 2 grass carp suddenly appeared in the bucket, making him gasp in surprise. Each grass carp is more than a foot long and weighs 3 to 4 kilograms. Its tail is swung lively, as if it dislikes the narrowness of the barrel. Before he could speak, Jian and Jiaxi were already cheering. We're surrounded by fish, crucian carp seeds, so many crucian carp seeds. Some people were fetching water not far away. When they heard the sound, they looked over here. Some people even jumped into the river, intending to catch fish. Jian and Jiaxi shrunk their necks, quickly took off their clothes, fished in a dozen palm-sized crucian carp seeds, lifted their legs and ran back. Li Laozi held the sheep in one hand and the fish in the other, and quickly followed. Oh, where did this fish come from? This grass carp is too big, and this crucian carp also has a lot of melon seeds. The Li family members gathered around and they were all crazy with joy. The 4th daughter-in-law, Li Laozi, gave her a tug, and the old lady Li quickly sent her 2nd daughter-in-law and 3rd daughter-in-law to kill the fish and make a stew. The weather was hot and I couldn't keep it, so I had to eat it all at once. When the surroundings became quiet, Li Laozi whispered. Mom, This is really weird. Fu Niu cried, and I just coaxed her a few words, and the fish was in the bucket. The small puddle around Jian and the others only had half a bucket of water, which was more than a dozen crucian carp. Old Mrs. Li glared at her son and cursed. Look at the fuss you are making. I have already said that our Fu Niu family is blessed. These things are the rations given to Fu Niu by God, and we will take advantage of them. Li Laosi scratched the back of his head. He actually felt that my mother was a bit nagging last night. Looking at the family now, everyone is only happy, not surprised. It seems that he is the only biological father who does not believe that his daughter is lucky. Li Jiyan tried her best to spit bubbles, smiled toothlessly, and tried her best to smear the saliva on her father's back. Let you not believe in this girl's abilities. Old Mrs. Li hugged her granddaughter and shouted to her daughters-in-law. Don't stew the fish first, heat up the goat milk quickly, and feed Fu Niu first. This is our baby. Tao Hongying struggled to stand up in the shade of the tree, picked up her daughter, and smiled all over her face. With crucian carp soup and eggs, her daughter will definitely be able to drink her mother's water. Li Jiyan listened to the happy chirping of her family members and twisted her neck proudly, which made Tao Hongying think she was about to poop, so she hurriedly opened the package to take a look. He also exposed his once, and Li Jiyan simply peed. The empty space in his stomach was quickly filled with goat's milk. Just when Li Jiyan was drowsy, Li Laosan quickly built another simple earthen stove and put a pottery basin on it. One is stewed with grass carp and cabbage, and the other is fried crucian carp in soup. There wasn't much vegetable oil brought at home, but there was a jar of soybean paste. Put a spoonful into the water and dissolve it. Cut the grass carp into sections and throw it in. Bring it to a boil and add the chopped cabbage. The aroma will soon become fragrant. Palm-sized crucian carp must use plain oil. Add a few drops under the pottery basin and fry the crucian carp until both sides are golden brown. Then add hot water and the soup will turn milky white. The aroma spread far and wide, and other victims who were traveling with the disaster paid it back, but the children couldn't bear it and gathered around them one after another. Jian and Jiaxi didn't care about drooling by the pot. They stood in front of them with tiger faces and scolded them from time to time. Finally, both pots of fish were ready. The Li family didn't even bother to boil them and quickly put them into their stomachs. Tao Hongying also gathered all her energy and gulped down the fish soup. Li Jiyan lay in her mother's arms, smelling the fragrance. Her little tongue couldn't help but lick it, and the saliva spread from the corner of her mouth to her neck. Tao Hongying couldn't help laughing when she saw it. She didn't know whether it was her love for her daughter that played a role, or whether the fish soup was really effective, but she finally felt something. So she quickly stuffed the grain bag into her daughter's mouth, and there was actually water. Li Jiyan was gagged, and a string of black crows flew past her forehead. Her adult soul really couldn't accept it, and breast milk didn't have the fragrance of goat's milk. But seeing her mother's eyes red with excitement, she became ruthless and started sucking. Mom, I have milk, woohoo, Fu Niu is full. The Li family all looked over and were very happy. This fish soup is so good. Li Lao and Li Lao San avoided suspicion and only glanced at him before turning back. The dozen or so salivating children who were watching and salivating took advantage of this opportunity to rush over and grab the remaining fish soup and a few pieces of fish in the pot. Ah, they robbed my fish. Jiaxi and Jian shouted in annoyance and wanted to catch up to ask for it, but they were stopped by Mrs. Li. Everyone come back, she knocked on the pot of her pipe and sighed. They are all poor people, forget it. Washing pots, packing things, and taking care of the food and luggage at home. The further back we go, the harder it becomes. Li Jiyan just vomited out the grain bag and was burped by her mother. She saw everything and fell in love with the Li family even more. Old Mrs. Li turned her head and saw her granddaughter smiling at her and drooling. She quickly stood up and took it, coaxing her heartily. After eating and drinking, Li Jiyan could no longer control his sleepiness and fell asleep again. But it was the sweet moment when someone seemed to be crying and woke her up. She was still lying in Tao Hongying's arms, but she was feeling a little hot. At this time, the night has passed and the sky is getting light. In the morning light, not far away, a carriage was surrounded by many people. A strong man pulled several children and threw them into the carriage. End of this chapter. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 4. Chapter 4: A world where humans are inferior to dogs. The child held the car door and cried desperately, "Oh, mother, don't sell me, I won't leave. I don't dare to ask for fish soup anymore, mother, don't sell me." The strong man was also ruthless, and he slashed the child on the back of the neck with a knife. The child fainted and was put into the carriage. The child's mother took half the bag of grain, lowered her head and ran away quickly. What a sin, what a pity. Tao Hongying kept shaking her head, and when she heard her daughter squealing, she realized that her face was red from being suppressed, and she quickly let go. Jiyan took a few deep breaths and felt uncomfortable. She was selling her child. Half a bag of grain can change a life. The strong man continued to shout, "I want to exchange food for children. The girl has 10 kilograms of millet, and the boy has 20 kilograms. If you have anything to exchange, hurry up and come here. The girl and the boy are just a burden to escape. If we exchange for food, the whole family can survive, and they can also find a way to survive." A basket of millet is placed in the sun, and it becomes more and more golden, making greedy people swallow their saliva. Some people's family background is already weak, and they have been on the road for half a month and have no food. As a result, more girls and boys were thrown into the car one after another crying loudly, and the family members were filled with millet, their heads drooped and their heads shrank. Everyone in the Li family watched under the shade of the tree and sighed. Separation of flesh and blood is a human tragedy. Let alone Zhao Yuru and Tao Hongying, even Wu Kuiwa didn't say anything unpleasant. After all, they were all mothers, and they despised this the most. Li Jiyan hid in her mother's arms, feeling extremely cold. Although she knew that these were troubled times these days, she worked hard to help the Li family have enough to eat. But now that I have truly witnessed such a tragic incident, I understand the true meaning of the word troubled times. I would rather be a dog in prosperous times than a person in troubled times. She subconsciously leaned against her mother's thumping chest. Tao Hongying lowered her head and saw her daughter grabbing her hair and looking unhappy, so she quickly patted her to comfort her. Old Mrs. Li heard the noise and whispered, "The child is young and her soul is not yet stable. If you take her to see any excitement, turn your back quickly." Tao Hongying sneered, wishing she could stuff her daughter back into her stomach. Those people probably knew that what they were doing was not a good deal. After a while, without any more lobbying, they jumped on the carriage and left quickly. Old Mrs. Li blew her pipe twice and ordered, "Invite the children to come back, hook up the car, and let's go." The young and old of the Li family were all busy. Li Laosi suddenly asked, "Where is Jia 11 and Jian? We were still under the tree over there just now." Li Jian raised his legs and went to look for it, but unfortunately there were still 2 boys anywhere. Everyone in the Li family was anxious and looked around to shout. The same children who robbed the fish stew last night pointed to the carriage that was running away and reminded them, they were pulled into the carriage. The faces of everyone in the Li family changed. Li Laosi quickly unloaded the cart, took the bow and arrows he used for hunting on his back, and ran away on the donkey pulling the cart. Li Lao Er, Li Lao San and others also want to chase, Mrs. Li shouted loudly. "Take the hatchet and sickle, I would rather see blood than the child back." 3 boys, Li Jiaran, Li Jiyi and Li Jiawan, even pulled the guy out from under the car and chased after him desperately. Mrs. Li was worried and called Zhao Yuru, third daughter-in-law, look after the fourth daughter-in-law and Fu Niuer. Then, she also chased after him. Ren Yazi's carriage slowed down after passing the mountain bend. Just when he was happy that the harvest was good, Li Laosi rode a donkey to catch up. The man escorting the cart couldn't help but laugh. The donkey rider doesn't want to compete with our good horse in terms of leg strength. As a result, before his words could reach the ground, a long feathered arrow hit his cheek and was nailed into the shaft of the chariot. Stop! If you don't stop, I'll shoot you to death. Li Laosi drew his bow with a long arrow in his hand, and pointed it at the man driving the car while running. The man cherished his life, and he hesitated for a moment before he ran closer. He got off the donkey, put his hands on the carriage board and struggled, and the carriage fell to the ground with a roar. The two men were startled and jumped aside in a hurry. The horse pulling the cart fell sideways and also whined. Boy, you are looking for death. The two big men were angry and pulled out the long knives at their waists and were about to step forward. At this time, Li Lao Er and Li Lao San also arrived with three boys. They rushed forward brandishing hatchets and shouting loudly. Fourth child, mother said she is not afraid of blood, she must get her child back. Li Laozi's eyes turned red when he heard this, and he kicked open the carriage door. The children inside had been smashed into a ball, and two of them had their hands and feet tied and their mouths gagged. It was Li Jiaxi and Li Jian. When they saw the family members, the two boys were crying until they had runny noses and tears, and they were whining and yelling. The two men were also anxious and stepped forward to confront the Li family, refusing to let them save people. At this moment, Mrs. Li arrived. She was relieved when she saw that her grandson was still alive. Two good men, our children are playful and accidentally got into your carriage. You are doing this business to make money, and you don't want to get into trouble, right? As long as you let our children go, we will go our separate ways. Otherwise, we will try our best to save your life. Li Lao Er and the others raised their sharp hatchets and sickles, and Li Lao Si also bent his bow and aimed an arrow at one of them. In fact, it was easy for Ren Yazi to capture two children. After all, it was a business without capital. How could I have imagined that this kid's family would be so united and brave? The two of them looked at each other, and both hesitated. Since it's a misunderstanding, get your children out quickly, we're on our way. Li Lao Si did not put down his bow and arrow. Li Lao Er stepped forward and pulled the two nephews out. He quickly untied the rope and tore off the rag from his mouth. The two children cried at the top of their lungs, but Mrs. Li gave them a slap in the face and immediately stopped talking. Li Laozi saw his family take more than 10 steps back, then he put away his bow and arrows, fought with both hands, and climbed over the carriage again. One of the men looked at it enthusiastically and couldn't help but test it. Brother, you are so weak, why don't you do business with us? Li Laozi refused to pay attention to them and strode back. The man looked bad, but he finally got into the carriage and started on his way again. It wasn't until the carriage disappeared that there was no shadow left, that the Li family breathed a sigh of relief. Hurry back, Hong Ying and the others are the only ones left to look after the luggage. Old Mrs. Li urged, and everyone realized that all the men in the family had arrived. It was too dangerous to leave only the woman, so Li Laozi rode the donkey and ran back. Good things don't work, bad things work. At this moment, next to the Li family's luggage cart, the wheelbarrow containing grain bags was empty and overturned on the ground. Tao Hongying held her child and Zhao Yuru closely guarded the donkey cart. Zhao Yuru is holding a stick, while Wu Kuiwa is hiding under the donkey cart. Anza's father, where is Anza, have you found him? Tao Hongying, who has always been lively and cheerful, also shed tears now. Even the infant Jiyan tried his best to stretch his neck and look out, fearing that his cute and naughty brother would be snatched away. Li Laozi responded quickly, found them. Jian and Jiaxi have been found. They are behind them and they will be back soon. Zhao Yuru also started to cry. It's good to find it. Wow, our food has been robbed. As soon as you left, those people came to grab the food bag. Hong Ying was pushed, and I couldn't stop it. End of this chapter. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 5. Chapter 5, adding insult to injury. Wu Kuiwa also jumped out and cursed, those ungrateful things ate our fish last night, and just now they refuse to help. Li Laosi gave her a cold look and refused to answer. The third sister-in-law also knows how to protect the luggage and his wife and children. The second sister-in-law will stand out when it is beneficial and hide when trouble occurs. If it wasn't for the second brother, he really wanted to slap her until her teeth were all over the floor. When Mrs. Li and others rushed back, she felt bad when she heard that the food had been robbed. Wu Kuiwa jumped up and down, as if she had just tried her best to protect the food. Old Mrs. Li knocked on the pot with her pipe. Shut your mouth. No one in the family knows what your virtues are. If you dare to talk too much, don't eat tonight. If the food is gone, how can we eat? Wu Kuiwa avoided the pipe pot and muttered something, which made the whole family look coldly. Mrs. Li took the swaddling clothes and saw her granddaughter's eyes shining brightly, feeling relieved. Grandma's Funiur, aren't you scared? Grandma is back, so we are not afraid. Jiyan replied with a bubble of saliva, trying to comfort the old lady, but all he heard was babbling. This actually made Mrs. Li even happier. That's it? If the food is gone, it will be gone. As long as the whole family is safe. Besides, we also have a little lucky girl in our family. With some blessings, we won't be hungry. Wu Kuiwa curled her lips and wanted to say something to make things more difficult, but was pulled back by Li Laoer. Go and pack your things and get on your way. Wu Kuiwa rolled her eyes, not daring to say anything. Jiyan lay in her mother's arms and sat on her father's wheelbarrow again on the road. Her little brows were furrowed, and she was trying to think of how to not be so shocking, but still be able to actually help the family. It's a pity that her little brain is not fully developed yet, so she couldn't think of a way to do it, so she fell asleep first. When Jiyan woke up again, it was already time to take a rest at noon. The sun was shining right now, and Tao Hongying was afraid that her daughter would be exposed to the sun, so she asked Jiaxi and Jian to pick up a few wooden sticks and tie them with strips of cloth. A piece of Li Laoxi's big cloth was covered on top to make a simple arbor to shade the sun. Wu Kuiwa glanced back at Jiyan from time to time, muttering something in her mouth that she didn't know what to say, and it probably wasn't anything good. The food was taken away, and now there was only half a bag of millet left on the donkey cart, as well as the sweet potatoes dug up earlier. With a big family and a few half-grown UPS, this thing can't last long at all. Old Mrs. Li took 2 puffs of her pipe and pot, her slightly cloudy eyes full of sorrow. Old I can keep the millet and sweet potatoes, so I'll keep them for now. Go to the mountains and see if you can find some food. Mrs. Li turned around to see that her granddaughter's eyes were still closed and she seemed not to be awake, and her voice was lowered a bit. Li Laosi readily agreed, put his bow and arrows on his back and headed up the mountain. Several boys wanted to follow, but Li Laosi drove them back. It is difficult to hunt when there are many people. They are impatient, and even if there is a pheasant, hare, or something, they will be scared away. Jiyan heard Mrs. Li's words and opened her eyes to look over. She only saw her father's strong back and was a little worried. In such a famine year, when even people have nothing to eat, how can those wild animals survive? Without her following him, it would be strange that her father could hunt any living creatures. Jiyan quickly stretched out her little hand and grabbed it in the direction of Li Laosi, babbling in an attempt to call her father back. Tao Hongying thought Jiyan was hungry, so she quickly held her in her arms and breastfed her. Jiyan suddenly took a mouthful of milk, and the baby's nature made her subconsciously start to swallow. With this interruption, Li Laozi was completely gone. Jiyan sighed silently. Oh, that's it? She will follow him next time. Half an hour later, there was no good news secretly taking things out of the space. As you can imagine, Li Laozi returned empty-handed. There are a lot of people around here. Not to mention the game on the mountain, even the bark of the trees has been almost stripped off, and there is no trace of the wild fruits and vegetables. Everyone saw Li Laozi coming back empty-handed. Although they were mentally prepared, they still felt a little melancholy when they thought about the little food left. Li Laoer looked at his brother's dark face with a hint of guilt, raised his hand and patted his shoulder lightly, jokingly. Look, we can't do it without our Fu Niuer by our side, right? Let me tell you, you should hug Fu Niuer before you set off, maybe you can catch a pheasant, hare, or something. His joking like this dissipated a bit of the sadness that had just filled the Li family, and everyone laughed together. Jiyan quite agreed with Li Laoer's words. He opened his little mouth, rubbed his 2 rows of toothless bald teeth up and down, and also babbling in response. Seeing her like this, Mrs. Li smiled even more happily. She reached out to tease her granddaughter and dangled the cigarette bag hanging under the pot in front of her. Jiyan's face was full of black lines. Why did his movements look like teasing a puppy? Even though she thought so in her heart, she still reached out her little hand to grab it resignedly, causing Mrs. Li and others to laugh again. Sister is not only a lucky girl, but also a pistachio. Jiyan smiled so hard that his teeth were almost exposed. He clapped his hands and said. Although they didn't find anything good in the mountains, the Li family couldn't go hungry. Mrs. Li grabbed a handful of millet and picked 2 small sweet potatoes. She gave them to her third daughter-in-law and asked her to cook them into a paste. Zhao Yuro carefully held the sweet potatoes and millet, put them in the pot, and took them to the river to wash them. Wu Kuiwa stretched her neck and looked at the half bag of sweet potatoes, and then looked at the 2 brothers Jiaxi and Jian who were milking Jiyan. Her eyes were rolling, and she didn't know what she was thinking about. When Zhao Yuro came back with the pot, Wu Kuiwa lazily started to help with the work. Hey, my 4th daughter-in-law has plenty of milk now, right? Wu Kuiwa and Zhao Yuro gathered together and asked her in a low voice. Zhao Yuro was cutting sweet potatoes into small pieces. When she heard Wu Kuiwa ask this question, she moved her hands and looked at her suspiciously. What are you asking for? Wu Kuiwa never cared much about Tao Hongying, but now she suddenly asked if she had enough milk, and she felt that she had bad intentions. I'll just ask. Wu Kuiwa felt a little guilty, raised her hand to wipe her nose, and continued to help Zhao Yuro. Handful of millet, 2 sweet potatoes, and half a pot of water. In the end, everyone got a bowl of slimy sweet potato and millet paste. Zhao Yuro has a sharp eye and saw a small bunch of green and yellow wild vegetables by the river. She added it to the paste to add a little more flavor. A few grown men and a half-grown boy drank a bowl of glutinous rice paste while snoring, and they were not even half full. Zhao Yuro drank half of the bowl and poured the rest of her bowl into Li Lao-san's bowl with a calm expression. In this time of famine and chaos, if their family wants to survive, they still have to count on these gentlemen. It's okay if she eats less. She has to let her men eat more. Li Lao-san looked at his wife guiltily and distressedly, then raised his head and drank the paste. Wu Kuiwa didn't seem to notice Zhao Yuru's actions, and drank her own paste in a few sips. She glanced at old Mrs. Li with furtive eyes, and saw that the old lady's face was quite kind, so she plucked up the courage to speak. End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 6. Chapter 6 Warning in the middle of the night. Mom, I think Hong Ying's milk is abundant now, and Fu Niuer won't be hungry. The dairy goat is also a burden following us, otherwise we will kill it. It will save us all from being so hungry, right? The more Wu Kuiwa talked, the more she felt justified, and her expression became more confident, as if she had everyone in mind. The Li family sat in a circle to eat, which was quite lively at first. As soon as she finished speaking, there was deathly silence. Wu Kuiwa felt a little guilty when she was stared at, but even after she said the words, she couldn't take them back, so she could only look at old Mrs. Li helplessly. Mrs. Li looked gloomy, put down the bowl with a snap, and said coldly, "That sheep is Fu Niuer's ration. I'm usually more lenient with you, but you actually care about your child's ration? Let me tell you, second daughter-in-law, you'd better stop thinking about it, otherwise don't blame me for being cruel. These days, who doesn't have several daughters-in-law starving to death?" Wu Kuiwa was so frightened that her face turned pale, she shrank her neck and didn't dare to say anything anymore. Ji Yin had been nestling in Tao Hongying's arms, so she naturally heard these words and moved her grandma to stand up for her. She tried her best to move her little head to the other side and stretched out her little hand towards Mrs. Li. When Mrs. Li saw her, she quickly took her granddaughter from Tao Hongying's arms and patted her carefully with her big, skinny hands. "Don't be afraid, Fu Niuer, as long as grandma is here, no one will be hungry and we Fu Niuer will not be hungry." Wu Kuiwa felt depressed and wanted to say something, but Li Laoer pulled her arm hard. She raised her eyes and looked at everyone, only to realize that except for Mrs. Li, who was coaxing the good news with a smile on her face, everyone else was looking at her coldly, including her husband and son. Wu Kuiwa hurriedly lowered her head and buried her face in the bowl, not daring to raise her head even if there was no paste in it. The good news was pressed against Mrs. Li's chest, listening to her heartbeat, which made me extremely moved and satisfied. The Li family really loves her, and with this love, she will never let the Li family go hungry. That evening, Ji Yin originally thought of waiting for the Li family to fall asleep and then secretly put some more grain into the grain bag. But she still overestimated the baby's physical strength. Before it was dark, she fell asleep with little burps. The night was quiet. The Li family had been walking for a day and were extremely tired. Everyone was sleeping soundly now. Even Li Laoer, who was responsible for keeping vigil, dozed off leaning on the stone beside the fire. Ji Yin suddenly woke up due to the need to urinate. She wanted to wake up Tao Hongying, who was sleeping on the side, but when she heard her slight snoring, she felt a little reluctant. This woman gave her a new life and continued the long journey without even having a chance to have confinement. While he was hesitating, two people touched the side of the donkey cart and were clearly seen by Ji Yin. Her mind, which was still a little confused at first, suddenly woke up. There is a thief. Looking at the two men crossing the donkey cart, they went straight to the dairy goat sleeping soundly under the tree. Ji Yin opened her little mouth and howled out. Li Laoer, who was keeping watch at night, suddenly jumped up from the ground when he heard the cry. "What are you two doing?" As soon as he got up, he saw two sneaky figures under the tree. He immediately shouted loudly and rushed over with the stick beside him. Other members of the Li family were also awakened. They picked up the guy next to them and surrounded the two sheep thieves. It was probably the first time that the two men had done something like this. They had never seen such a battle before. They were so frightened that their paws were numb. The two of them huddled together and shivered. Even so, one of the people was still holding a leg of the dairy goat in his hand, and he didn't know whether he forgot to let go or didn't want to let go. "How dare you come to steal my sheep, you damned one, let's see if I don't beat you to death." Wu Kuiwa was originally hiding behind, but when she saw that the two men were too timid to move, she gained the courage and rushed forward to give them a few kicks. Li Laosi stepped forward and tried to pull the sheep out, but the men refused to let go. The men of the Li family suddenly became more angry. They held them down and beat them up. The two of them looked as thin as monkeys, with their cheeks sunken. They had no strength to fight back and could only keep wailing. They must be really hungry. Orange Mrs. Li and Tao Hongying, who was holding the good news, looked on. Although Tao Hongying was angry, she was afraid of being frightened by the good news, so she turned her face away and coaxed in a low voice. Mrs. Li looked at these two people carefully and guessed that they were also poor people fleeing famine. In order to survive, they had evil intentions, so they wouldn't be beaten to death. The beating hurts and it's okay to remember it. She waited for a while and then shouted to her children and grandchildren, "Okay, stop it." When Li Laozi and others heard this, they all stopped. "Get out, if you dare to sneak around again, I'll break your legs." Li Lao kicked one of the men hard, and everyone moved aside to tell the two men to get out. The two men were beaten until their noses were bruised and their faces were swollen. They still dared to think wrong and ran away, as if they were afraid that the Li family would catch them back and beat them again. "Hey, you said it's so late at night, we just had our food robbed, and now we've been robbed again. How are we going to live like this?" Wu Kuiwa sat down on the ground and let out a long sigh. Whether intentionally or not, she kicked the goat with her foot. Mrs. Li and others glanced at Wu Kuiwa and were too lazy to talk to her. Seeing no one to answer her, Wu Kuiwa looked unhappy, glanced at Tao Hongying with a sly eye, and started talking to herself again. "Mom, according to me, this dairy goat is the bane. Without it, would we be able to sleep well at night? Kill it as soon as possible, and we will save ourselves so much trouble." She sat on the ground, staring intently at the goat held by Li Laozi. It seemed that as long as Mrs. Li nodded, she could pounce on it and take a bite. Old Mrs. Li's face darkened, her eyes full of anger. "Second daughter-in-law. What did I tell you during the day? Are you too sleepy, or do you no longer see me as a mother? Do you really think I dare not leave you behind?" Her tone was cold and hard. Although she had been stern before, she had never spoken to her daughters-in-law like this before. It was obvious that she was angry. Wu Kuiwa was so frightened that she opened and closed her mouth several times, but she couldn't say a word. "This sheep belongs to Fu Niur. From today on, if anyone dares to mention slaughtering a sheep, I will sell her to someone else." Mrs. Li's eyes swept across the whole family. But everyone knows that the sentence was meant for Wu Kuiwa. Li Lao quickly pulled his wife up from the ground and slapped her hard. Now Wu Kuiwa no longer dared to talk nonsense, and huddled behind Li Lao, her face red and white, looking like a pallet. Early the next morning, Zhao Yura cooked for the Li family. While eating, I saw the two men who had stolen the sheep again. They were as hungry as wolves. They stared at the Li family's rice bowl from a distance, their eyes glowing green, but they did not dare to take a step closer to the Li family. "We will continue on our way in a moment, fourth brother, please keep an eye out and don't let them follow you any closer." Old Mrs. Li glanced at the two people and warned Mr. Li. Li Laozi nodded and tightened the hatchet in his hand. These two people had no family members around them and were no different from desperados. On the other hand, the Li family has a family and a family, so there is no need to get involved with them. End of this chapter. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 7. Chapter 7. There's something weird about this porridge. Fortunately, the two men were also frightened by the beating, so they changed the road halfway and took the initiative to stay away from the Li family. The Li family had another day of hard hiking. When they reached the bottom of a hillside, they saw the sun setting. Old Lady Li stopped the donkey cart directly and asked everyone to have a rest. After being exposed to the sun for a day, the Li family members were already thirsty. A few half-grown boys were all dried up by the sun, like a few green onions that lacked water. "The good news has been blocked by Tao Hongying," so she didn't get the sun's rays, but she still felt a little depressed and lacked energy. "Mom, I'm going to cook." Zhao Yuru packed up the things on the donkey cart, handed the kettle to Tao Hongying, and then took the millet to cook. Tao Hongying saw that Ji Yin's little mouth was dry, so she gave her some water to moisten her throat. "Ouch, why is my head so confused?" Seeing that it was time to cook again, Wu Kuiwa lingered beside the donkey cart, covering her head and groaning. Orange Mrs. Li tapped the edge of the donkey cart with her pipe pot and asked her expressionlessly. "Second daughter-in-law, what's going on?" "Mom, maybe I have heat stroke, I need to rest for a while." Wu Kuiwa's voice was hollow. As she spoke, she sat down in the shadow of the donkey cart and deliberately squeezed Tao Hongying. Old Mrs. Li gouged out Wu Kuiwa. She was really uncomfortable and fake, but she couldn't tell. Just thinking about being lazy. But now they are on the road to escape, and they have no extra energy to discipline their daughter-in-law. She simply snorted, "If you feel uncomfortable, just sit down and eat half a bowl of rice for a while. Just cleanse your intestines and you'll be fine." Wu Kuiwa stiffened, but still groaned and refused to get up. She was exhausted anyway, so Zhao Yuru could just let her do it if she wanted to. "Mom, I'm going to help the third sister-in-law." Tao Hongying had just fed Ji Yin. Seeing Wu Kuiwa's appearance, she stood up directly, carried Ji Yin, who had eaten and drank enough, behind her back and wrapped it in a cloth bag. After saying that, without waiting for Mrs. Li to stop her, she went over to help Zhao Yuru. Ji Yin was only a few days old, and Tao Hongying was not yet pregnant, so her health was certainly not good. But they were the only three daughters-in-law at home, and Wu Kuiwa was lazy and asked Zhao Yuru to serve her and cook all day long, which made her feel uncomfortable. In this day and age, it's good to be alive, so there's no need to talk about having a good confinement period. Tao Hongying felt a slight pain in her lower abdomen, but it was not unbearable. She held Tuo Ji Yin's little buttocks and squatted by the fire to add firewood. Zhao Yuru had long been accustomed to Wu Kuiwa's lazy behavior. When she saw Tao Hongying coming to help, she wanted to persuade her to go back, but she swallowed her words again. It's all in vain. Once Tao Hongying comes over, she will definitely not go back. She still worked hard so that her younger siblings could relax. "Hongying, sit down while I go over there to see if I can find some wild vegetables." Zhao Yuru found a stone for Tao Hongying to sit on, and then took a small shovel to dig for wild vegetables in the hay on the hillside. Ji Yin was lying on her mother's back, looking around with her big, dark, moist eyes. At this time, the Li family were all busy with the things they were doing, and no one paid attention to them. So she started to make small moves again. She first made a few noises in her mother's ear. Tao Hongying quickly turned to look at her daughter, stretched out her hand to hold her in front of her and untied the small cloth scarf. "What's wrong, Fu Niur? Did you pee?" Ji Yin took advantage of this moment and seemed to be waving his little hands randomly, but in fact, he secretly sprinkled the millet in the space into the pot. As soon as she finished tinkering, Tao Hongying, who made sure the diaper was dry, held her in his arms again. Like a little thief who had just done something bad, Ji Yin quickly reached out to touch Tao Hongying's ears and spit out 2 saliva bubbles. "I'm hungry just after eating, why do I act like a little pig?" Tao Hongying was amused by her daughter, so she adjusted her posture and lifted her clothes to breastfeed her. After these days, Ji Yin has long been accustomed to breastfeeding. There was no hesitation at the moment, he opened his mouth and sucked heavily. Zhao Yuru didn't dig any wild vegetables. When she came back, she saw Tao Hongying breastfeeding, so she helped her sit under the shade of a nearby tree. Then he took a long wooden spoon and stirred the bottom of the pot to prevent it from getting too mushy. As a result, she was stunned when she put the long wooden spoon into the pot and stirred it. "How come the porridge cooked with half a bowl of millet is so thick?" It's almost the same as dry rice, and it's still half a pot. Zhao Yuru raised her head and glanced at Tao Hongying, who was still teasing Fu Niuer and making her giggle loudly. Zhao Yuru cooked the porridge full of wonder and waited until it was divided among the Li family, then she asked them to eat with a strange expression. "Mom, how much rice did you give Yuru? Why is the porridge so thick today and still a big bowl full?" Li Lao-san took the bowl, a little surprised, but more worried. "There is not much food left at home. If you eat so much in one meal, what will you do in the future?" Old Mrs. Li was the first to take over the rice bowl, and of course she found the porridge to be strange. After all, it was the half bowl of millet she scooped for Zhao Yuru with her own hands, which was definitely not enough for the Li family to share a large bowl of thick porridge. "Shut up and eat your food." Old Mrs. Li suppressed the excitement in her heart, lowered her head, took a sip of porridge, and scolded her son. Li Lao-san was stunned for a moment, and he also vaguely thought about it. He subconsciously glanced at Ji Yin, who was lying on the side playing with his fingers, and quickly lowered his head to take a big gulp of the porridge. Of course others did not dare to say anything. This meal is a rare full meal for the Li family, but it is also the most silent meal. However, they couldn't control their eyes and kept focusing on the fat and fair face of Ji Yin. Invariably, everyone blamed Fu Niuer for this evil thing. It must be this child's blessing again, and the whole family is once again blessed. After dinner, Mrs. Li held the good news in her arms. She liked it so much that she kept shouting out of her heart. "Fu Niuer, Grandma's little Fu Niuer. You are only a little old, and Grandma is enjoying the blessings with you. Grandma is so happy." The old lady danced with joy at the good news, making the old lady laugh even more. Jia 11 and Jia An were dancing together, trying to hug their sister, and maybe they could even pick up some eggs. In this way, Ji Yin would secretly put the rice stored in the small courtyard into the pot while Tao Hongying was helping her cook. The Li family ate extravagant food and traveled all the way. Not only did they not lose weight, a few of the young men even gained a lot of weight. "Mom, pier. There is the pier in front." Half a month later, the Li family finally arrived at the dock. Li Laoer went to inquire about the news, and soon ran back to announce the good news to his whole family. The Li family felt relieved and their eyes were red. After many days of escaping, they finally saw the light of day. "As long as we can find a boat heading south, we can reach Kyoto in less than half a month." Everyone has quickened their pace. But when they actually came to the dock, the scene they saw with their own eyes was like a bucket of cold water poured down on them, giving them a chill. There are boats at the dock, but there are also countless people fleeing the famine. That boat belonged to wealthy people, and they went south along the waterway to escape the war. When I saw the victims at the pier, I wanted to hide far away, let alone let them take a boat. "Sir, please give us a ride. We are willing to act like cows or horses, just to survive." Some victims knelt by the dock and begged the rich people on the boat, but the rich people were so stingy that they didn't even want to look at them. End of this chapter. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 8. Chapter 8. My goat is a sweet potato. Some people jumped off the pier without giving up and wanted to reach out to grab the side of the ship. As a result, he was severely beaten by the servants on the boat and accidentally fell into the fast river. Although he was too hungry to begin with, the man struggled twice before disappearing into the water without a trace. The child's father, a woman, was lying on the side of the pier crying loudly. Had it not been for the family members around her to stop her, she would have jumped down. The woman's painful cries infected the surrounding victims, and for a while, the pier was filled with cries. Even before the Li family got close, their hearts felt heavy. Needless to say, it would be difficult to take a boat to Kyoto to join my uncle's family. But if we walk there, it is 1,000 miles away. Not to mention how hard it is, but there are many difficulties and countless dangers along the way. How can we keep the whole family safe? Old Mrs. Lee clenched the pipe and pot in her hand, her heart filled with sadness. After a long silence, she pointed to an open space far away from the victims and said in a deep voice, "Let's go over there and have a rest first, and then we'll slowly figure out a solution." The Lee family settled down quickly, as if feeling the low pressure permeating the adults. Even the two naughty boys Jia 11 and Jia An sat on the side very obediently and did not run around. Mrs. Lee and her sons wandered around the pier twice, but couldn't find any hope of getting on a boat, so they had to come back dejectedly. Jian was nestled in Tao Hongying's arms, her brows furrowed and she had a headache. She could do something secretly if she had no food, but she didn't have a boat. She can't conjure a ship out of thin air. "Let's cook first, the children are hungry too." Old Mrs. Lee was so worried that she seemed to have aged several years instantly. She clicked her pipe and forgot to put tobacco in the pot. If there is really no other way, their whole family will have no choice but to walk thousands of miles to Kyoto. Old Mrs. Lee looked up at the dim sky in the south, and sighed as if her breath was on fire. There was good news, and the Lee family had a good meal secretly. The victims at the dock were so hungry that their eyes turned green when they smelled the aroma of food wafting past the Lee family. However, there were many men in the Lee family, and the hatchets in their hands were bright, so the victims only dared to look at them and did not dare to actually come up to grab them. As night fell, a large and gorgeous passenger ship slowly docked at the pier. There were several strong young men standing beside the boat, each holding a wooden stick as thick as an arm and looking fiercely. The victims, who were eager to try, quickly retracted their heads when they saw this. Mrs. Lee was resting on the donkey cart while the campfire crackled 2 steps away. When she heard the sound, she opened her eyelids and took a look. "This boat looks like it belongs to a wealthy family, and it will definitely not carry disaster victims." She sighed and turned her head to see her little granddaughter sleeping soundly in Tao Hongying's arms, with a little hope in her eyes. "The little granddaughter is blessed. I hope this time it can bring hope to the family." Mother, look, someone is getting off the boat." Li Lao-san gently pushed Mrs. Lee, her voice nervous and urgent. The big boat took the gangplank to the pier, and several people quickly jumped off. The middle-aged man headed by him has neatly combed hair. Although the clothes he wears are not silk and satin, they are fine fabrics that are rarely seen in the Lee family. He looks like an unusual person. The man was followed by 2 boys, who looked around for a while after getting off the boat. As soon as he saw the Lee family, he walked straight towards them. "Old man, we want to buy this dairy goat from your family. Do you want money or grain? Can you give me a price?" The man could tell at a glance that old Mrs. Lee, who was surrounded by the Lee family, was in charge. He walked up to her and explained his purpose straight to the point. The dairy goat was tied to the donkey cart. It was probably hungry and was bleeding. Mrs. Lee was startled when she heard this. No wonder these people came straight to them. It turned out that they were interested in her sheep. But this sheep is the granddaughter's food ration, and the 4th daughter-in-law does not have enough milk. If the sheep were sold, Fu Niuer would be hungry. Old Mrs. Lee was about to refuse when she opened her mouth, but Wu Kuiwat on the side suddenly grabbed old Mrs. Lee and said, "Mom." She finally saw that her mother-in-law would not even give up the food that was delivered to her for the sake of that little girl's movie. She hurriedly gathered beside Mrs. Lee and said, "Mom, this sheep is a burden to us. It seems that these people are not short of money. Let's get more grain and sell the sheep." Old Mrs. Lee turned cold and glared at Wu Kuiwat. "No, Fu Niuer still has to drink goat's milk." Before she could finish her words, Wu Kuiwat had the courage to interrupt her directly. "Mom, you don't know how much food is left in our family, and Hongying has no milk. Do you really want to make our whole family hungry just for the sake of a girl's movie?" Wu Kuiwat jumped to accuse Mrs. Lee, completely forgetting that she had not been hungry for a meal in the past few days, and she relied entirely on good news. Shut up. Seeing Wu Kuiwa's dead look, Mrs. Li really wanted to strangle her to death. Why were you so confused in the first place that you married your son to such a house wrecker? Tao Hongying was afraid that her mother-in-law would be angry, so she came forward with good news in her arms and asked. Sir, let me ask you a question, what do you want to do with the sheep? She thought clearly that if it was just for goat milk, the Li family could milk some and sell them, but if they wanted goats, they would definitely not be able to do so. That middle-aged man is a steward, and he always does things with money. He is rarely successful, but he didn't expect that he would end up with a family of refugees. He was a little unhappy, but he didn't hide it and explained in a cold voice. My young lady is only half a year old, and the nurse we brought out from home is seasick. She has lost her appetite these days and has run out of milk. Madam was so anxious that she happened to see a dairy goat you had here on the boat, so she ordered us to buy it back. Hearing what he said, everyone in the Li family knew what was going on. No matter whether they are born high or low, children always need extra care and attention. Orange Mrs. Li couldn't bear it when she heard that there were children starving on the ship. But my granddaughter also wants to drink milk, and she cannot sell it no matter what. Master, look, my granddaughter is not even a month old. If we don't have the milk goat, she will probably starve to death. I'm really sorry, we can't sell this goat. As she spoke, she held Jianyan in her arms and leaned forward. Mother, when Wu Kuiwa heard Mrs. Li's words, she immediately screamed in dissatisfaction, but was then covered by Mrs. Li's mouth and dragged away. The middle-aged steward glanced down, and Jianyan's eyes were looking at him curiously. He was looked at by these clear eyes, and his heart softened no matter how hard he was. But he was really heartbroken when he thought that his young lady was so hungry that her face was thin. While on the boat, I thought I was lucky and unexpectedly encountered a dairy goat. Only then did I realize that I was overjoyed. He couldn't help but sigh, in that case, then. Jiyan was so anxious that her hands and feet were trapped in her swaddling clothes. She finally freed one of her arms, pointed to the big ship at the pier and shouted, "Ah, ah." Mrs. Li thought her granddaughter was curious, so she patted the baby gently. She was about to coax her a few words, but suddenly an idea came to her mind. Hey, big brother, wait a minute. The middle-aged manager thought that Mrs. Li had regretted her decision, so he immediately turned around and looked at her expectantly. Sister, have you changed your mind? He got excited and changed his title. Old Mrs. Li shook her head. No, no, big brother, we will never sell this sheep. But every family has children, and I can't bear to hear that your lady is starving. In this case, I have a suggestion, do you agree with it? End of this chapter. You are listening to Novels at Bless Up channel. Wish you happiness and luck. Please subscribe to receive new novels. How do you feel about this novel? Please like and leave a comment. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 9. Chapter 9 Life-Saving Straw. Old Mrs. Li and her granddaughter pointed at the big ship and said with a smile. Your boat looks really big, and it must be spacious inside. If you don't mind, could you give us a ride? Since they are in the same boat, the goat's milk can of course be drunk by two children together. Li Lauer and others' eyes lit up when they heard this, and they stepped forward to salute in tacit understanding. Master, we all have strength and can help with the work, and we are also good at boxing and kicking, so we can help to resist difficulties on the road. Tao Hongying was also not to be outdone and continued. I can help with laundry and cooking. My ancestors had royal chefs, and the food I cook is delicious and clean. Even the boys from GR&GE shouted, we can mop the deck and run errands all night. The middle-aged manager did not expect that the Li family would make such a proposal, but after thinking about it carefully, it was not impossible. They came out in a hurry this time and did not bring enough people, otherwise the master would not have only one wet nurse by his side. It would have been easier for him if the family had come on board to help with the work. But he was just a steward, so he still had to go back and ask his master. "Old sister, I have to go back and tell the master. The master is probably asleep at the moment. I will have someone come and give you an answer early tomorrow morning." Of course old Mrs. Lee agreed, and the middle-aged steward took the young man back to the ship. The Lee family all breathed a sigh of relief, and looked at each other with a bit of joy. Only Wukwewa, who was free, muttered, but she didn't dare to speak loudly under Lee Lauer's cold eyes. Mrs. Lee told Mr. Lee to take good care of the sheep, and then she sat in a daze holding the good news in her arms. This matter is related to the future destiny of the Lee family. If it is successful, their whole family will not have to travel thousands of miles. In these troubled times, if we settle down a day earlier, we can avoid more accidents and dangers. Ji-Yin felt the trembling in her grandma's palms, sighed in her heart, and turned her little head to the side to look around. The rest of the Lee family also had their eyes open in the night, and no one could fall asleep. The bonfire next to the donkey cart was swaying by the river wind, just like the Lee family's current mood. Even if there is only a glimmer of hope, they are eager to grasp it. Ji-Yin stretched out her small hand to hold old Mrs. Lee's big hand, and called her babblingly. "Are you hungry, Funiuer, Jiaran? Hurry up and squeeze the goat's milk and boil it." Mrs. Lee quickly patted her granddaughter and called her grandson for help. The Lee family seemed to be turned on by this voice, and they all got up and got busy, which diluted the uneasiness just now. The child's body couldn't hold on for long. After Ji-Yin drank the goat's milk for a while, he fell asleep again. When she woke up again, the sky was already slightly bright. The Lee family really didn't sleep all night. Everyone's eyes were red and they were anxiously waiting for the people on the boat to come over. When the sun was completely above the horizon, a boy finally jumped out of the big boat and trotted all the way to the Lee family. "Our wife has agreed, please quickly pack your things and come on board with me." Even before the boy finished speaking, the joy on the faces of the Lee family could no longer be concealed. The servant brought not only good news, but also hope for the survival of the Lee family. No more having to sleep in the open and in fear. Even Mrs. Lee, who had always been strong, turned her head and wiped her tears. Tao Hongying hugged her daughter and kissed her again and again. Li Laosan and Zhao Yuru even hugged each other and cried. Jiaxi and Jian were jumping up and down, venting their ecstasy. Everyone's hearts were hung up all night, and now they could finally return to their stomachs. Mrs. Lee took her granddaughter from Tao Hongying's arms, pressed her face against hers, and whispered, "My granddaughter is very lucky. She has provided food for herself and found a way for the whole family to survive. Old lady, let's leave quickly. How many people are watching? It will be troublesome if we delay any longer." The boy couldn't help but urge, and the Lee family also woke up and quickly gathered together. Li Lauer was originally a bookkeeper, so the only donkey in the family was given to him to sell. Although I only took half of the silver, it was very smooth. In such a short time, everyone also packed their luggage. Facing the envious and jealous eyes of other victims, he quickly followed the young man onto the boat. The middle-aged steward last night was waiting at the side of the boat. When he saw the dairy goat being carried onto the boat by Mr. Lee, he smiled and pointed at the boy. "Your accommodation has been arranged. Follow Wang Fu to put your luggage." The Lee family all bowed and expressed their thanks. "My name is Wang Jian. From now on you can just call me the king to take charge of things." The middle-aged steward turned to Mrs. Lee and said again, "Old lady, our lady heard that the child in your family is not yet 1 month old, so she asked me to take the child to show her. You sort it out and come with me. Our wife was on the boat all day and was very depressed. Just chat with madam, Don't be nervous. How dare Mrs. Lee refuse to agree? She took Tao Hongying to the cabin and quickly changed into a pair of clean clothes. Then she hugged Jiyan and followed Steward Wang to the room at the front of the ship. Madam, the Li family's mother-in-law and daughter-in-law are here. Steward Wang knocked on the door gently, and when he heard a reply from inside, he carefully opened the door and let Mrs. Lee and the others in. This big ship already looks very spacious and majestic, but I didn't expect that the rooms on the ship would be even more exquisitely decorated. The tables and chairs are made of oily fine yellow pear wood, and the carved window lattice is made of flexible snow-white tissue paper. There is an orange-yellow copper incense burner on the table. Fine smoke floats out from the hole above, and the whole room is filled with a calming fragrance. Old Mrs. Lee had never seen such a scene before, and she was a little dazed by the wealth in her eyes. But it was only for a moment. She quickly suppressed her thoughts of looking around and stood behind Manager Wang with a low eyebrow. Tao Hongying also stood at the back with good news in her arms, her eyes falling on the floor half a meter in front of her toes, quiet and calm. The woman sitting on the chair by the window looks to be in her 30s, wearing a light purple brocade dress. The black hair was pulled up into a simple bun, with a delicate red hairpin inlaid with jewels on her head. It complemented her snow-white skin and red lips. At first glance, she looked like a pampered and wealthy person. The little girl she was holding in her arms was about half a year old. She was carved in pink and jade, with dark eyes that were moist and lively. She was wearing a crimson dress and looked rich. The noble lady was very satisfied with the rules of Mrs. Lee and her daughter-in-law. When she looked at the swaddling clothes in their arms, her eyes softened even more. She had no heirs in her early years. In order to have a son, she went around burning incense and worshipping Buddha, doing good deeds and accumulating merit. I only got a daughter when I was approaching my 30s. Now is the time when motherly love is overflowing. So, as soon as Manager Wang said it this morning, she agreed to allow the Li family to board the boat. After all, poor people value money very seriously. It is really rare for the Li family to give up gold and silver for their children. You guys sit down, don't be restrained. Mrs. Sun raised her hand and motioned for Mrs. Lee and her daughter-in-law to sit down. Mrs. Lee and Tao Hongying thanked each other and only dared to sit on half of the chairs. Mrs. Lee thought for a while, lowered her voice, but said it very sincerely. Thank you, madam, for allowing our family to take the boat. Madam, rest assured that our family will keep to ourselves and will not cause trouble on the boat, and we will try our best to repay madam for her kindness. These words were true, and Mrs. Sun felt relieved after hearing them. She wanted to speak, but she saw Jiyan stretching her neck as much as she could, as if she wanted to watch the fun. The baby's face is fair and plump, which makes people happy just to look at it. End of this chapter. Dressed as a farm boy, he cheated on his way out of the desert. Author, Delayed Flowering. Chapter 10. Chapter 10 The Rules of Rich People. She smiled and said, Mom, you're welcome. It's fate that we can take the same boat to go south. It's not much of a kindness, it's just a simple effort. After saying that, she looked at Tao Hongying. Can you bring your child over and show me? Hearing this, Tao Hongying quickly adjusted her posture and walked up to Mrs. Sun with the good news in her arms. Jiyan naturally knows that this woman is a noble member of their Li family, and they still expect her to take care of her in the future. So she tried her best to open her mouth and giggle happily. Smiling like this, her saliva flowed into her neck uncontrollably, tickling her, and she started shaking her head again. Mrs. Sun was so amused that she couldn't stop laughing, and she also held her little daughter close to the swaddling clothes. Nanny, look how cute this little sister is. Children are all willing to imitate others. Miss Sun shook her head happily when she saw the good news, and she also shook her head and laughed. Finally, two little hands must be stretched out to touch the good news. Oh, my daughter is smiling. Mrs. Sun was even more happy to see her daughter so lively. These days, my daughter hasn't had enough to eat, and she hasn't had much rest on the boat. She has been crying for several days, and it is rare for her to be so energetic. This little girl from the Lee family is really interesting. With her on the boat in the future, it will definitely be a lot better for my daughter to have more playmates. Mrs. Sun fell in love with the good news the more she read it, so she asked the maid beside her to get a wooden box from the dressing table. The wooden box was opened, and Mrs. Sun took out a gold collar inside, with a small longevity lock hanging underneath. I ordered people to make these longevity locks before my daughter was born. I made 2 of them. I just want to give the extra one to your children. Madam, this is not possible, it is too expensive. Mrs. Lee quickly refused, but Mrs. Sun directly put the longevity lock around Ji-Yin's neck. I like this child, what's wrong with giving him a small gift? After she finished speaking, she gently pinched Ji-Yin's chubby little face. Ji-Yin didn't expect such a surprise. She loved it so much that she gave the sponsor a toothless smile. Mrs. Lee still wanted to refuse. After all, she was very grateful to be able to take the boat to the south. How could she ask for such a valuable thing? But at this time, Zhao Yuro came in with a maid carrying 2 bowls of goat's milk. Madam, the goat milk has been delivered, the maid whispered. I watched the milking and cooked it. I added almonds to remove the fishy smell. Mrs. Sun nodded, and Mrs. Lee remembered a few gossips she had heard occasionally. The nobles of the big households have to test poison. This goat milk comes from their Lee family, and it is difficult to make people doubt. So, she quickly called to Tao Hongying, Fu Niu has a quick mouth, feed her first. As she spoke, she took a spoon, scooped up the goat's milk, and brought it to Ji-Yin's mouth. Ji-Yin gave her grandma a big thumbs up in her heart, and then drank happily. The fragrance of milk gradually filled the air, and the daughter in Mrs. Sun's arms was a little anxious. She stretched out her little hand to grab the goat milk bowl again. Na. Na. Hurry up and feed your daughter. Mrs. Sun quickly handed her daughter to the wet nurse's arms. The maid also scooped up the goat's milk and carefully fed it to the young lady. Perhaps she was hungry, or was infected by the good news. Miss Sun also followed her example and drank. Her appetite made Mrs. Sun even more happy. We will continue our journey in a while. If you have anything to do, just tell the steward Wang. Don't be polite. From now on, you can often chat with the children. Mrs. Sun took advantage of the break when the 2 children were drinking milk and gently gave instructions to Mrs. Lee and Tao Hongying. Old Mrs. Lee responded quickly, feeling much more at ease. By the time the 2 bowls of goat's milk were gone, Ji-Yin and Miss Sun's bellies were both full. Miss Sun also gave a soft burp and nestled in Mrs. Sun's arms. Her black grape-like eyes stared at the good news, which was even younger than hers, without blinking, which was very novel. Orange Mrs. Lee and Tao Hongying chatted with Mrs. Sun for a while, until both children were sleepy. They returned to their residence. This is the simplest servant's room. It is at the end of the cabin on the lowest level. The room has no windows and the floor is still damp. The Lee family is divided into men and women, occupying a total of 2 rooms. The small space makes them feel a little crowded even when they turn around. Even so, the Lee family and the young are also grateful to the Sun family. As long as they can get to Kyoto safely, they can endure even an environment worse than this. Mom, I put a straw mat under your shop. If your legs and feet are not good, don't get damp. Zhao Yuru helped Mrs. Lee to her berth and gave her instructions carefully. Mrs. Lee nodded, feeling pleased with her 3rd daughter-in-law's thoughtfulness. 2nd sister-in-law and 2nd brother have gone to help with the work, and I have to go there soon. Brother Wang Fu said just now that you are old and don't have to do anything. Hongying has to breastfeed her child and just go to work when she is free. Zhao Yuru works steadily and has a gentle temperament. After a while, she has become familiar with several boys on the boat. Okay, go and do your work quickly. Remember to keep an eye on the second daughter-in-law and don't let her talk nonsense. Mrs. Li told Zhao Yuru, and Zhao Yuru agreed, stretched out the mattress again, and then went out to do some work. Mrs. Li sat back on the bunk, held her granddaughter in her arms, patted her gently, and breathed a long sigh of relief. At this point, their family has finally settled on the Sun family's boat. Jiyan felt sorry for her grandma and wanted to make her smile, but she was too full and fell asleep quickly. At 3 poles in the sun, the big ship slid into the river again and set sail. Leaving the dock, he also left the victims with miserable eyes. After a day of adapting, the Li family brothers each found a suitable job to help. Li Lauer was good at writing and doing calculations, and he helped Manager Wang with purchasing and accounting, and he soon became a good helper for Manager Wang. Li Laosan is a man of few words, but he was originally a mason with skillful and careful hands. Where there are hidden dangers on the ship, he only needs to study them for a while before he can repair and strengthen them. Li Laosi is very strong and it is easy for him to lift heavy objects. It took several boys working together to lift the big deck, but he could lift it easily alone. Jiaran and his younger brothers were not idle either. They took the initiative to help the servants. They had good eyesight and worked neatly. The main thing is that their family is not the Sun family's slaves, and no matter how good they do, they will not take credit. So, the boy was very pleasing to them, took good care of everything, and occasionally secretly stuffed them with a bag of pine nut candies. Li Jiawen did not follow the brothers around, but helped Tao Hongying and Zhao Yuru cook in the back kitchen. He was busy around the cooking pot, which made Tao Hongying and Zhao Yuru feel much more relaxed. The Li family is so diligent, so the boat can't help but be much more lively than before. The sounds of men working and the sounds of children chasing and laughing made the ship, which was heading south to escape the war, feel more relaxed. Mrs. Sun listened to the faint laughter on the deck and patted her sleeping daughter gently with a smile on her face. Outside the window, Jiyan was lying on her grandma's back, looking at the river view. Mrs. Li was afraid that her granddaughter would be swallowed by the wind, so she surrounded her with only one pair of eyes. It was very interesting to watch, and everyone who passed by would tease her. End of this chapter.